In the cold expanse of space where stars were born and died, a quiet hum echoed through the vast nothingness, far from the reach of civilization. Drifting silently between the remnants of forgotten wars, a ship stirred its engines, igniting the darkness with a faint pulse of light. The Prometheus had been fought lost centuries ago, buried in the silence of an uncharted sector where no one dared to tread. But now it was returning. Humanity's forgotten legacy was awakening from the depths of time. The Xaxar Dominion ruled the stars with an iron fist, their ships towering above lesser species, their war machines unmatched by any other empire across the galaxy. Their dominance was unquestioned, and their reach limitless. They believed nothing could challenge them until a signal pinged across their most secure communication networks, a faint whisper from the edges of known space. It was unimportant at first, just another anomaly, easily ignored. But as the days passed and the signal persisted, the commanders of the Xaxar fleet began to grow uneasy. Something ancient was stirring. The Dominion's top officers dismissed the threat with contempt. They were masters of the stars. Who would dare challenge them with such an old relic? They assumed the humans were long gone, faded into the dust of history, irrelevant. But the signal grew stronger, more urgent in its message. The sensors aboard the fleet ships now picking up the silhouette of something huge, something moving with purpose. The Prometheus emerged from the dark void, slipping into the Xaxar's sensor range without a single warning, its hull gleaming under the distant stars, its weapon systems powered up and ready. But the Xaxar fleet still believed this to be a relic, a ship from a species that had never been a serious threat, who had been wiped out millennia ago. So they laughed at the sight of it, laughed at the idea of a human ship facing their mighty armada, and at first nothing seemed to change. But then the first shot rang out. The Prometheus fired its first laser from long range, and it struck with a precision no one had expected, a direct hit to the forward shields of a nearby Xaxar destroyer. The shockwave from the impact shuddered across the fleet. The Xaxar captains froze, staring at their monitors in disbelief. This couldn't be possible. How could something so old and so weak strike with such deadly force? The Prometheus fired again and again, the shots carving through the darkness with deadly accuracy, ripping apart one Xaxar ship after another. They retaliated, of course, launching counterattacks, but their weapons found no purchase. The Prometheus was faster than anything they'd ever encountered, its movements unpredictable and chaotic. The Xaxar ships were large, slow, and arrogant. They had not prepared for an opponent who did not fight by their rules. Inside the Prometheus, the crew worked with cold precision, each move calculated to ensure survival, each shot designed to disable rather than destroy. They were the last of humanity's military, a small but determined force with nothing left to lose. They had learned to survive, and now they had come for vengeance, not just for themselves, but for every human who had ever been forgotten by the galaxy. The Xaxar began to panic, their proud fleet scrambling in every direction, but the Prometheus was everywhere, at once a ghost moving through the darkness, hunting them one by one. As the Prometheus danced through the chaos, Captain Maya Bennett stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the view ahead. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about proving to the galaxy that humanity was not done, not forgotten, not weak, and certainly not to be ignored. The Xaxar fleet scrambled in every direction, their ships weaving through space with the kind of chaotic urgency that comes only from realizing their invincibility was an illusion. They had been so sure that humanity was a thing of the past, a brief flicker in the galaxy's history. Now that flicker was returning with fire in its eyes. The Prometheus had torn through their defenses as if they were made of paper, and in its wake, confusion and fear spread among the Xaxar commanders. Something had gone wrong. They had been blindsided, and they had no idea how to respond. Captain Renkar, the commander of the Xaxar flagship Warner, seethed in his command chair as he watched another of his ships fall into the abyss. The humans had taken down the Xerix, one of their most powerful destroyers, in a matter of moments. A single shot from the Prometheus had crippled the ship's engines, rendering it a floating husk, easy prey for further assault. Renkar's mind raced, but his hand stayed steady as he barked orders to his officers. "Get me a full report on that human ship," he demanded, trying to maintain a facade of calm. "Where did it come from? Why didn't we see it before? The ship's sensors hummed with frantic activity, but the answer was always the same. The Prometheus had come out of nowhere. It wasn't just that they couldn't track it. They had no clue it was even there until it was too late. The human ship wasn't acting like any vessel they had encountered. Its movements were unpredictable, its tactics unconventional. It didn't follow the usual rules of warfare, the rules that Taxar had established over millennia of conquest. "That ship's not supposed to exist," muttered Captain Renkar under his breath, barely able to believe the reality unfolding before him. Meanwhile, aboard the Prometheus, Captain Maya Bennett studied the ever-shifting battlefield with cold precision. There was no room for hesitation, no time for fear. The survival of humanity depended on this battle. They weren't just fighting for victory. They were fighting for their right to exist in a galaxy that had long since forgotten them. Her crew, a mix of veterans and young recruits, worked together as a well-oiled machine, responding to her commands with military discipline, even in the face of overwhelming odds. "All systems report ready," Lieutenant Hayes, the weapons officer, called out. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. The energy in the air was palpable, thick with the anticipation of the next strike. "Good," Maya replied, her eyes scanning the chaos unfolding on the view screen. The fleet of Taxar ships was closing in on their position, and it seemed as though they were finally organizing a counterattack. But Maya was far from concerned. They might have superior numbers, but the Prometheus had something that Taxar couldn't replicate: the unpredictability of humanity. And that was a weapon the Taxar couldn't defend against. "Brace for impact," Maya ordered. The Prometheus surged forward, cutting through space like a blade through water. The ship's engines roared to life, and within seconds they were darting through the chaos with unmatched agility. The Taxar fired relentlessly, but the human ship moved too quickly, its evasive maneuvers throwing off their targeting systems. Shots missed, and the Prometheus retaliated with deadly accuracy. Each pulse of fire from its weapon systems seemed to tear apart everything it touched, leaving the Taxar scrambling to adapt. "Captain," said Lieutenant Miller, the navigator, "we've got an opening. The Tyrak is vulnerable. We can take it out now." Maya's eyes narrowed. The Tyrak was the largest and most heavily armored of the Taxar ships, and taking it down would deal a crippling blow to their fleet. Without hesitation, she gave the command. "Do it. Target their engines." The Prometheus adjusted its course, diving through the wreckage of fallen Taxar ships with the grace of a dancer. In a flash, the massive Tyrak was in their sights. Maya's hand hovered over the controls, her heart steady despite the tension, and with a single push, the Prometheus unleashed a volley of shots. The energy beams struck with surgical precision, hitting the Tyrak's weak point, their engine core. The explosion rocked the void, sending a shockwave that rattled every nearby vessel. The Tyrak was no more. In the silence that followed, a ripple of disbelief passed through the Taxar fleet. The humans had done the impossible once again. "Captain," Hayes said, his voice tinged with awe, "they're retreating. They don't know how to handle us." Maya's gaze remained fixed on the unfolding chaos. This was just the beginning. The Taxar had no idea what was coming next. The Prometheus wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol, and the humans aboard it were more than warriors. They were survivors, hunters, and they weren't going to stop until the galaxy knew the truth. Humanity was far from gone. And now, the Prometheus was going to make sure that Taxar never forgot. The Prometheus hung in the dark expanse, its sleek silhouette a beacon of defiance against the vast, uncaring galaxy. The Taxar had thought the human ship was a mere relic, an ancient ghost forgotten by time. But now it was alive and lethal, and it wasn't going to stop. The Prometheus wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol of humanity's refusal to be erased, a sharp reminder that no matter how far they'd been pushed into the dark, they were not to be underestimated. And with each passing moment, the Taxar were learning that lesson in the hardest possible way. On board, Captain Maya Bennett stood at the helm, her expression focused, her hands steady. The bridge crew worked in perfect harmony, each member of the crew knowing exactly what was at stake. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in what felt like forever, Maya felt a spark of hope. Humanity was fighting back, and the Kaxar were realizing that no amount of advanced weaponry or superior numbers could change the fact that they were dealing with something they'd never faced before. "Captain," Lieutenant Hayes called out, his voice cutting through the tension in the air. "We've made contact with the second wave of Kaxar reinforcements. They're closing in fast. At least 5 capital ships, more on the way. They're learning, adapting. We'll need to change tactics if we're going to keep up." Maya nodded, the weight of the moment settling in. The first wave had been brutal, but the Kaxar were nothing if not persistent. Their numbers were overwhelming, their technology nearly impossible to breach. But Maya knew that the Prometheus had something that could never be matched: the heart of humanity. "We won't outrun them forever," Maya said, her voice steady, but filled with a quiet determination. "We'll make our stand here. Set course for the nebula ahead. It's our best shot. The cloud will obscure our sensors, give us cover. But we'll need to time this perfectly. Once we're in, we fight until we can't anymore." The crew murmured their acknowledgement, and the Prometheus surged forward, slipping past the wreckage of Kaxar ships with a speed that belied its size. The nebula ahead glowed faintly, a chaotic mass of gas and dust swirling in the darkness. It was the perfect place to turn the tables. The Kaxar were predictable in their tactics, and Maya was going to use that to her advantage. "Navigation. Plot our entry angle. We need to get as deep as possible into the cloud. Weapons. Prepare for an engagement at close range. We're going to give them a fight they won't forget." As the Prometheus entered the nebula, the bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's engines and the occasional burst of static from the ship's comms. The misty clouds surrounded them, a thick shroud that made it impossible for the Kaxar to track their movements with precision. The advantage was theirs, at least for now. Hayes gripped the weapons console, eyes darting across his screens as he adjusted the ship's targeting systems. "We're in range, Captain. Targets locked. Ready when you are." Maya took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the viewscreen as the first of the Kaxar ships emerged from the haze, unaware of the trap they were walking into. "Now," she said, her voice low and commanding, "let's show them what humanity can do." The Prometheus fired first, a barrage of high-powered lasers cutting through the nebulous cloud of dust and gas. The shots tore into the lead Kaxar ship, hitting it square in its weak spot. The engines. The Kaxar had no time to react. The explosion was deafening, rippling through the mist, and the ship disintegrated in an instant, debris scattered across the nebula like a broken mirror in space. One down, and more to go. The remaining Kaxar ships immediately responded, unleashing their own firepower as they attempted to surround the Prometheus. But the Prometheus was fast, weaving between the gas clouds, using the environment to its advantage. The Kaxar had the firepower, but the humans had the unpredictability. The Prometheus darted between massive asteroids, using the celestial bodies as shields from incoming blasts, then striking out with pinpoint accuracy when an opening appeared. Another one on the left. Miller, the navigator, called out, his voice calm as ever. "They're coming in fast, Captain." Maya didn't hesitate. She slapped the button on her command chair, giving the order that would change the tide of the battle. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. We're not running. We're hunting." The crew sprang into action, executing maneuvers with a precision that only years of training and desperation could produce. The Prometheus turned sharply, spiraling upward as it avoided the barrage of laser fire from two Kaxar ships closing in. The energy beams passed harmlessly through the space they'd occupied seconds earlier, missing by mere inches. Then, without warning, the Prometheus fired back, its weapons system unleashing a devastating volley that blasted apart the leading Kaxar ship before it even had time to respond. The XXR were beginning to panic. The numbers had no effect. The firepower didn't matter. Humanity was relentless, unpredictable, and now they were showing the galaxy exactly what they could do. The Prometheus was no longer just a ship. It was the embodiment of a species that refused to die. And the Taxar were finally starting to understand that when humans hunted, they hunted to win. The battle raged on with a ferocity that rippled through the dark expanse of the nebula. The Prometheus was no longer just an isolated relic from humanity's past. It had become a living nightmare for the Taxar, a symbol of defiance they could not ignore. Every maneuver, every strike, was calculated with ruthless precision, and the Taxar found themselves in a deadly game they didn't know how to play. They were used to overwhelming their enemies with sheer power, but humans didn't fight like anyone else in the galaxy. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Captain Maya Bennett stood at the helm, her focus unwavering. Her crew was as calm as she was, moving in sync like a well-oiled machine. The Xaxar had underestimated them at first, thinking their superior firepower would crush the human vessel without effort. But now, the Xaxar were learning that no amount of firepower could replace what the humans had: ingenuity, adaptability, and the will to survive. They were hunters, and now the Xaxar were the prey. "Captain," Hayes called from the weapons station, his voice filled with excitement and disbelief. "We've neutralized 2 more ships. The rest are starting to regroup. Looks like they're trying to form a defensive perimeter around their flagship. They're panicking." Maya's lips curled into a tight smile. The Xaxar were getting desperate, and desperation always led to mistakes. "Let them regroup," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "This is the moment we've been waiting for. We need to strike at their heart." Lieutenant Miller, the navigator, tapped a few keys on his console. "We've got an opening, Captain. The flagship is vulnerable. There's a blind spot in their defensive grid. If we move now, we can hit them hard before they can react." Maya nodded, her fingers moving swiftly over the controls. "Set course for the flagship. Full speed. No hesitation. We end this here." The Prometheus surged forward, its engines roaring as it shot through the nebula, with the grace of a predator closing in on its prey. The remaining Xaxar ships tried to cut off its path, firing indiscriminately, but the Prometheus was too fast, too unpredictable. It darted between massive asteroids, weaving in and out of the swirling gas clouds, evading their attacks with terrifying ease. "Prepare for close-quarters combat," Maya ordered, her voice steady but filled with a fierce determination. "Weapons, ready the plasma cannons. This is our chance." The Taxar flagship loomed ahead, its massive hull gleaming in the dim light of the nebula. Maya's eyes locked on the target, and for a moment, everything else faded away. This was it. This was the moment that would either break the Taxar or make humanity's place in the galaxy known forever. "Targets locked," Hayes reported. "Plasma cannons charged and ready." Fire. The Prometheus unleashed its fury. The plasma beams shot forward with a blinding intensity, crashing into the Taxar flagship's shield systems. The force of the impact rippled through the surrounding space, sending shockwaves through the nebula. The flagship staggered, its shields flickering as the first volley of fire tore into its external defenses. But the flagship wasn't finished yet. It retaliated immediately, launching a barrage of missiles in the direction of the Prometheus. "Brace for impact," Maya commanded as the crew scrambled to make the ship move at impossible speeds. The Prometheus dodged the incoming missiles with mere seconds to spare, each near miss vibrating through the hull. "We're through their defenses," Miller shouted, his eyes wide with excitement. "We've got a clear shot at the main reactor." "Take it," Maya said without hesitation. "Now or never." The Prometheus's weapons hummed to life again. And this time, the target wasn't a shield or an engine. It was the heart of the Taxar flagship. The crew fired everything they had, sending a concentrated beam directly at the core of the ship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the flagship shuddered violently as the energy from the blast found its mark. The core exploded with a deafening roar, sending an inferno of light and fire tearing through the ship's inner structure. "Direct hit," Hayes said, his voice breathless. "They're finished, Captain." But Maya wasn't looking at the destroyed flagship. Her gaze was already scanning the space around them, her mind calculating the next move. There were still Xaxar ships on the battlefield, still a chance they could regroup and retaliate. The Prometheus wasn't out of danger yet. "Lieutenant Miller, set course for the remaining fleet. We finish what we started," Maya said, her voice cold with determination. The Xaxar were no longer the invincible empire they had once been. The Prometheus had pierced their arrogance and their defenses. They had underestimated humanity. And now, the tables were turned. The Prometheus was hunting them. And it wasn't going to stop until every last Xaxar ship was nothing more than a memory in the stars. The wreckage of the Xaxar flagship drifted slowly into the darkness, its once proud form reduced to little more than a burning husk of twisted metal and sparks. The debris scattered across the nebula, a grim reminder of what happened when a species underestimated humanity. The Prometheus had struck with brutal precision, but it was not enough. The Xaxar fleet, though damaged and reeling, wasn't finished yet. They were regrouping, and their thirst for vengeance was palpable. Maya could feel it in the air, a collective desire to wipe the humans off the map, to ensure that the message was clear: don't mess with the Xaxar. "Captain," Lieutenant Miller called, his voice tight with urgency. "More ships incoming. They're forming up around their last two command ships. They've called for reinforcements from the main fleet. If we don't act now, they'll outnumber us again." Maya's gaze locked on the view screen. The nebula had become a battlefield, filled with the wreckage of their enemies, but also the looming threat of more Xaxar warships. There was no room for retreat. Not that retreat was even in her mind. The humans had already made it clear that they would fight to the last. She wasn't going to back down now. "How many ships left?" Maya asked, her tone cold but decisive. "6, Hayes answered quickly, "all heavily armed. But if we strike first, we can catch them off guard. Their defensive perimeter is still weak from the flagship's destruction." Maya stood motionless for a moment, weighing the options in her mind. The Xaxar were relentless, but so were they. The Prometheus had already proven it could take down entire capital ships, but the remaining Xaxar were learning, adapting, and they were furious. If they had enough time to regroup, their next move could be decisive. "We take the fight to them," Maya said, her eyes narrowing with determination. "No hesitation. We go straight for the weakest ship. We break them one by one." Her crew nodded in silent agreement. Every person on the bridge knew the stakes. They knew that the outcome of this battle could decide not just the fate of the Prometheus, but the future of humanity in this corner of the galaxy. They would not be forgotten again. "Helm, take us in," Maya ordered. "Weapons, target the lid ship. We take them out before they even know what hit them." The Prometheus surged forward, its engines firing at full power. The nebula swirled around them, providing cover, but it was becoming clear that the Xaxar would no longer make the same mistakes. Their ships were already maneuvering with more precision, more coordination. The remaining Xaxar forces were pulling together, organizing their defenses as the remaining warships formed a deadly, unbreakable wall around their last two command ships. "Target locked," Hayes called, his fingers dancing across the weapons console. "Ready when you are, Captain." Maya gripped the armrests of her chair, her mind clear. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving that humanity could endure, that they were worth something in the grand scheme of the universe. Fire. The Prometheus unleashed its fury, the plasma cannons roaring to life as they blasted into the lead Xaxar ship. The beam connected with the ship's shields, shattering them instantly. The ship faltered, its engines flickering as it tried to regain control. But it was too late. Another blast from the Prometheus struck the core of the ship, and it exploded in a flash of light, its remains scattering like ashes in the wind. "One down," Hayes said, his voice filled with the kind of excitement that only came from the thrill of victory. But Maya knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. "Keep firing," Maya ordered. "We keep them on their toes. Don't give them time to regroup." The Prometheus darted through the battlefield, cutting through the remains of the fallen Taxar ships with lightning speed. Each shot from the Prometheus tore through the enemy ranks, sending shockwaves rippling across space. The Taxar were no longer moving in perfect formation. They were scattering, panicking, trying desperately to regroup, but the Prometheus was everywhere. It was a ghost, a phantom that struck with terrifying speed and accuracy. But even as the humans continued to press their advantage, Maya knew that every victory came at a cost. The Prometheus's shields were beginning to flicker under the relentless barrage of Taxar fire, and the ship's hull was showing signs of damage. The crew was exhausted. Every man and woman aboard pushed to their limits. But they kept going, their spirits unbroken, because they knew that they could not afford to stop. "Captain," Miller said, his voice strained, "the last two ships are breaking formation. They're targeting us with everything they've got." "Not for long," Maya said, gritting her teeth. "We finish this now. All weapons, focus on the flagship. We take it down, and the rest will scatter." The Prometheus surged forward, locking its sights on the last Taxar flagship. The battle had already taken a heavy toll on the Taxar fleet, and their final command ship was now the only thing standing between the humans and their victory. With one final, all-out assault, the Prometheus fired everything it had left. Plasma beams, missiles, and concentrated energy strikes slammed into the flagship's shields, cracking them open. With a deafening explosion, the Taxar flagship crumpled, the once mighty ship disintegrating under the weight of human resolve. The remaining Taxar ships turned and flowed into the darkness, their morale shattered, their fleet in ruins. The battle was over. But as Maya watched the final remnants of the Taxar fleet disappear into the void, she couldn't shake the feeling that the war was far from over. The galaxy had just learned a harsh truth. Humanity was alive, and it was not to be underestimated. And the Prometheus, it was only the beginning. The Prometheus drifted slowly through the wreckage of the once mighty Taxar fleet, the silence after battle almost as deafening as the chaos that had unfolded just moments before. Pieces of shattered Taxar ships floated like debris across the nebula, and the faint glow of the gas clouds reflected off the scared hull of the human warship. It had been a brutal, hard-fought victory, but victory had its price. Captain Maya Bennett stood at the bridge's viewport, her eyes scanning the aftermath of the battle. The Prometheus had delivered a decisive blow, but now that the adrenaline had begun to subside, the reality of the damage set in. The ship was badly wounded. Shields were down to critical levels. The weapon systems were only partially functional, and several sections of the ship had sustained heavy structural damage. There were casualties too, though nothing like what the Taxar had endured. Humanity had taken a toll, but not one it couldn't recover from. "Captain," Lieutenant Miller said, his voice breaking the silence, "we've scanned the area, and we've confirmed the last of the Taxar ships have fled into deep space. They're scattering, but there are still survivors among the wreckage. Some of their ships didn't explode. They're drifting, barely functional. I recommend we salvage what we can. We might find useful technology or intel." Maya turned away from the viewport, her eyes narrowing with determination. "Send out recovery teams. We take what we can use. It's a new war now, and we need every advantage we can get." Her crew nodded in agreement, and the recovery operations began. For a moment, there was a quiet lull in the chaos, a brief window where the Prometheus's battered crew could catch their breath. But the weight of the battle still hung heavy in the air. Lieutenant Hayes, the weapons officer, was the next to speak. "Captain, we're getting a transmission from the Fleet Command. It's Admiral Stevens." Maya's eyes flicked toward Hayes, her brow furrowed. Put it through." The screen flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Admiral Stevens, his image tight with worry. "Captain Bennett," he said, his voice grave. "I've been monitoring your progress. It's good to see you survived. You've dealt a significant blow to the Taxar, but don't think they'll take this lightly. This battle is just the beginning." "I know, sir," Maya replied, her voice unwavering. "We're not finished. The Taxar are down, but they won't stay down for long." "That's the problem," Stevens said. "They've underestimated humanity once, but that's not something they'll do again. They'll regroup, and they'll come for you. For us. You've made an enemy today, one that's not going to let this go. The Prometheus may be a symbol, but symbols don't win wars." Maya stared at the screen, her thoughts racing. She could hear the fear in Stevens's voice, the concern that humanity's small victory was just a fleeting moment in a much larger struggle. She had no illusions about the Taxar. They were a powerful, ruthless empire, and they would not forget the humiliation they had suffered. But that didn't matter. "We'll be ready," Maya said firmly. "We've just shown the galaxy that humanity is not a species to be trifled with. We've got the technology we need, and we've got the will to keep fighting. We won't wait for them to come to us. We'll hunt them down, and we'll take back what's ours." The image of Stevens flickered for a moment, his expression softening, though his concern remained. "I hope you're right, Captain. Keep me posted on your status, and take care of that ship. You're going to need it for what's coming." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in a heavy silence once more. Maya's crew exchanged looks, some filled with exhaustion, others with a quiet determination. The Prometheus had just carved a mark in the galaxy, but the road ahead was only going to get harder. Maya took a deep breath and turned to face her crew. "We've earned this moment, but the fight isn't over. The Taxar will regroup, and they'll come at us harder than ever. We need to be prepared for that. But we've learned something today. We are not weak. We are not outmatched. We have survived, and we will keep surviving." Her words hung in the air, a rallying cry that was met with solemn nods from the crew. They had proven something to themselves and the galaxy. They could fight back. But the hard truth was that the Taxar would be coming with everything they had. And this time, the Prometheus would not be alone. "Captain," Miller said, breaking the silence once again, "I've got a new signal coming in, unidentified. It's coming from deep space. It's not Taxar. It's—" Before he could finish, a warning alarm blared through the bridge. The ship's systems lit up with flashing red lights. "On screen," Maya ordered, her heart rate spiking. The view screen flickered, and for a moment, the stars were nothing more than specks of light. Then the image cleared. A massive fleet appeared, unlike anything the crew had seen before. Alien in design, its ships were sleek and ominous, their dark silhouettes casting long shadows across the nebula. There was no mistaking it. This was another power in the galaxy, one that had been watching. And it was now staring down the Prometheus. Maya's breath caught in her chest. The fight was far from over. It was only just beginning. The massive fleet loomed on the view screen, its ships stark and black against the nebulous backdrop. Maya Bennett's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the eerie, alien vessels grow larger, their forms unlike anything humanity had encountered before. The hulls of the ships were sleek and angular, their surfaces reflecting a cold, metallic sheen, devoid of insignia or any markings that might provide even a hint of their origin. This was no Taxar fleet. It was something new, something more mysterious, and possibly far more dangerous. "Helm, full evasive maneuvers," Maya ordered, her voice sharp, but her mind racing. The Prometheus was battered, barely holding together after the intense battle with the Taxar. She didn't have time to wonder who these newcomers were. The Prometheus wasn't equipped for a fight of this magnitude. Not yet. They had to act quickly, with everything they had. "Captain, their ships are massive," Lieutenant Miller said, his fingers flying over the console. I'm detecting multiple energy signatures, but they're not activating weapons. It's almost like they're waiting for us to make the first move. Not this time, Maya said grimly. We're not here to start a fight, but we sure as hell aren't going to back down either. Keep our shields up. I want full scans of their fleet. Every detail, every frequency. Let's see if we can learn something about them before we do anything else. The bridge crew worked in tense silence as the alien ships approached. The unknown fleet wasn't rushing in like the Xaxar had. They were deliberate, slow, like predators sizing up their prey. Maya's instincts screamed at her to avoid a direct confrontation, but she also knew that this could be an opportunity, a chance to find allies, or at the very least, information that could give humanity an edge. Captain, Hayes said, his voice tight with caution. They're emitting some kind of signal. It's not anything we've seen before. It's almost like a transmission, but I can't decode it. Don't try decoding it yet, Maya replied, her mind still racing. We don't want to make any sudden moves. See if we can get some visual data on their ships. Figure out if they have any weaknesses we can exploit if we need to. Suddenly, the alien fleet's lead ship flared with a bright light, and an eerie humming sound filled the bridge. It wasn't a weapon, but it felt unsettling. The intensity of the energy pulse grew stronger, filling the Prometheus's sensors with static. Captain, Miller said, his voice laced with tension. They're broadcasting something directly at us. It's a direct communication. We're being hailed. The words hit Maya like a shock. She hadn't expected contact so soon. She looked over at Miller, then back at the screen, steeling herself for whatever was coming next. Put it through, she ordered. A figure appeared on the screen, its face strange and alien, unlike anything Maya had ever seen before. The being had an elongated, smooth head with dark, reflective eyes. Its skin appeared to shimmer like liquid metal. And its voice, when it spoke, carried a strange resonance, a tone that seemed both familiar and completely foreign. We have been watching you, humans, the alien said. The voice was deep, its cadence deliberate, each word weighed with meaning. Your victory over the Xaxar has not gone unnoticed. Your species has potential. We have no desire to fight you, but we will not allow you to threaten the balance of the galaxy. Maya's grip tightened on the armrests of her chair. The statement was as cryptic as it was ominous. Who were these beings? Why were they here? And what did they mean by balance of the galaxy? You speak of balance, Maya said, her voice steady but firm, her instincts telling her that any weakness now could be catastrophic. What exactly are you threatening, and why? The alien being paused, its reflective eyes flickering, as if considering the weight of her words. The Xaxar were a necessary force, one that kept the expansion of lesser civilizations in check. But you humans have disrupted the flow. We are not your enemy, Captain Bennett, but neither can we allow your kind to grow unchecked. The galaxy must remain in balance. We will see if you are worthy of that balance. Maya's pulse quickened as the alien's words sank in. The Xaxar, a force of terror and conquest, had kept other species in line. And now, this mysterious alien race had come forward, apparently judging humanity's place in the grand order of the galaxy. Balance, Maya repeated, her tone almost mocking. You speak of balance, but you're threatening our existence. What gives you the right to decide our fate? The alien's lips curled in what might have been a smile, though it was hard to tell. We are not here to destroy you, Captain. We are here to guide you, to show you your place. What you do next will decide whether you rise as a force of power or fall into obscurity. The choice will be yours. But know this, you will not be allowed to stand in the way of the order we have established. Mina's mind raced as the transmission ended, leaving only a lingering chill in the air. She exchanged uneasy glances with her crew. The Prometheus had just faced the wrath of the Xaxar, and now a far more mysterious and possibly more dangerous power had arrived. Her hands were shaking as she gripped the chair. The galaxy was far more complex than they'd realized. Humanity had taken its first steps into a much larger, far darker universe, and now they were being watched by eyes much older and more powerful than their own. "Prepare for anything," Maya said, her voice low and resolute. "Whatever happens, we will not bow to threats. Humanity decides its fate, not anyone else." The Prometheus drifted alone in the vastness of space, its crew bracing for the unknown. The tension aboard the Prometheus was palpable, a thick, suffocating presence that clung to the crew like an unseen fog. Maya Bennett stood in the center of the bridge, her eyes locked on the empty space where the mysterious alien fleet had once been. The transmission had ended abruptly, leaving more questions than answers. The threat of these unknown beings hung over them like a shadow, and the galaxy had just grown far more dangerous. They'd gone silent. Miller reported from his station, his voice barely above a whisper. "The alien fleet is still in the area, but they're not making any more moves. They're watching us." Maya didn't look at him. Instead, her gaze remained fixed on the stars beyond the viewport. The silence in the void was unnerving. It felt like the calm before a storm, and she could almost hear the pounding of her heart echoing through the empty space. They had just survived a brutal fight with the Taxer, and now this new threat loomed larger than anything they had faced before. This alien race seemed powerful, calculating, and cold. They were not the kind of enemies humanity could fight with brute force alone. "I don't trust them," A said, breaking the silence with his blunt assessment. He stood at the weapons console, his expression tense. "They're playing games with us. They said they're here to guide us. But I don't buy it." "I don't buy it either," Maya replied, finally turning to face her crew. "But we don't have a choice but to play along for now. They've made it clear that if we push too hard, they'll wipe us out, just like they did with the Taxer. But if we let them dictate our future, we're nothing more than pawns in their game." "What exactly do they want from us?" Miller asked, his fingers tapping nervously on the console. "We've already taken down the Taxer. What makes them think we're a threat?" "Maybe they think we're more than a threat," Maya said, her voice heavy with thought. "Maybe they think we're a challenge, a new force that could disrupt everything they've built. Whatever their reasons, we're not in a position to make enemies with them. Not yet." For a long moment, the crew exchanged uneasy glances. The Prometheus had proven itself capable of taking down a Taxer fleet, but this was different. This wasn't just a matter of firepower or strategy. This was about surviving in a galaxy that had just revealed itself to be much more complex than any of them had imagined. "Captain," Hayes said, his tone filled with hesitation, "there's something else. I've been analyzing their transmissions. There's a pattern to it. The signal they sent, it's not just a warning. It's a challenge. A test." Maya's heart skipped a beat. "A test?" "Yes," Hayes said, turning toward her. "If you look closely at the frequencies, it's almost like they're trying to gauge us. They've got their eyes on us, but I don't think it's just about whether we live or die. They want to see what we're capable of. They want to know if we can be useful." "Useful for what?" Maya asked, narrowing her eyes. "And how do we prove we're worthy of their approval?" "We don't know yet," Hayes admitted. "But I think we're being tested. They're waiting for us to make a move, to show how we react." Maya turned toward the tactical console, her mind working through the possibilities. Every instinct told her to be cautious, to avoid any rash decisions, but she knew that hesitation in the face of such a powerful force would not serve them well. They had already proven themselves capable of great things, but this was a different kind of fight. "We'll play their game for now," she said finally, her voice steady. "We'll take the high road, show them we can act with intelligence, not just brute force. We're not going to start a war we don't understand, but we're also not going to bow to anyone. Humanity decides its fate." The crew nodded, their faces grim but resolute. No one knew what the aliens wanted, but there was one thing they all understood. They would not surrender. They had come too far, fought too hard, to simply fall in line with some mysterious cosmic power. If the galaxy was to change, it would be on their terms. "Lieutenant Miller," Maya said, her voice now filled with authority, "send a message to the alien fleet. Tell them we understand their warning, but that humanity does not take orders. We'll fight for our place in this galaxy, and if they stand in our way, we will fight them just like we fought the Caxer." "Message sent, Captain," Miller replied, his fingers tapping away at the console. "It's going out now." Maya looked out at the stars once again, her thoughts filled with the weight of the decision they had just made. The Prometheus was battered, but it was still standing. Humanity had taken its first steps into a universe full of mysteries and dangers, but it had also proven something undeniable. They would not be cowed. "Now we wait," Maya said quietly, her voice filled with a quiet determination. "And whatever happens next, we're ready. Humanity will shape its own future." The crew nodded, a sense of resolve settling over them like a protective shield. The galaxy had just taken notice of humanity, and now it was time to see what kind of mark they would leave on it. In the silence that followed, the Prometheus drifted deeper into the unknown, carrying with it the last hope of a species that refused to be ignored.